All right. So how did I get to do what I'm doing right now? Well, I'm doing a lot of things. So obviously it's a big problem where do you start? But let me give you a little bit a short version of where I come from. Was born in France, came to the U.S. in 1979 for my PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. Emphasis on civil engineering and more specifically in the area of geological engineering and so on. Applied for a job at the University of Colorado in 1982, ended up going there in September of 1982, and I've been at the University of Colorado since 1982, so I've been there for 35 years. Climbed the ranks of assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor, and okay, for the first, I would say, 20 plus years of my career, I was really focusing on what I was doing best, which was geological engineering. Until 1997, when my wife and I and the kids, we bought a house not far from Boulder, Colorado, and we needed some landscaping done. And I selected a landscaping company at random from the phone book, and I tell people you've got to be careful about random process because it can lead you to some interesting places in life. And so a few days later, some people from that landscaping company came to our house, and all three of them were from Belize. They were working in Colorado during the summer, and one of them told me about the needs of Mayan Indians, young Mayan Indians in Belize, in the area of technical education. And he told me that, well, that would be nice if you could help in developing a curriculum and so on and so forth. I said yes, and lost track of those three guys for about 2 years. And in December of 1999, I received an email from this gentleman. His name is Angel Tsek, who told me, well, I was in your backyard 2 years ago, and we talked about, this idea of helping us. And I said yes, and would you be interested in coming over? So to make a long story short, in April of 2000, I ended up in Belize and visited some small communities, Mayan communities, and one after the other, and came across one village in particular by the name of San Pablo, where I witnessed and was told that little girls in that village were carrying water from the river to the village. And they told me, hey, you are a civil engineer, well, can you do something about it? And I said, well, yeah, certainly can have a pump to pump the water from the river to the village. And yes, that sounds good, and it was interesting because the problem was presented to me more like a social issue rather than an engineering issue. It was not, design a pump or design this, a typical homework assignment that you see at the end of chapter 5. It was about improving the life of people. And that really threw me off in many ways because I was not expecting that kind of problem statement. How can you improve the life of little girls in a village so they can go to school? And so it was somewhat, it pushed me into a place where I said, well, I'm really confused. And sometimes confusion is actually quite good. And then so I said yes, and then visited that place in 2000 and came back to the University of Colorado, talked to some students about the project, and then the students say, hey, we want to be part of it. And that's how it led to the creation of Engineers Without Borders in 2001, 2002. About 10, 12 students and I went there, built the pump. And it was an interesting pump because that pump was relying on the energy from a waterfall, since the community did not have access to electricity or was quite poor, as a matter of fact. So that was another area where I discovered essentially technology engineering for, I would call it, developing world. I would call that engineering with a human face, engineering with a human heart, human-centered type of design. You can call it whatever you want, but the bottom line is how you combine engineering with social issues and improve people's lives. So it was really a midlife awakening. It was not a midlife crisis for me, a midlife awakening. And we quickly realized that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. I said, that's it. I want to grow up and do that kind of work. And I looked around, looked at existing programs, and did not find anybody doing engineering for the developing world. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. You know, I'm 46 years old at that time. I'm going to go for it and start a new program, which I ran in parallel to my regular job, let's put it that way. Did I want to start the organization? No. The students dragged me into it. They say, hey, that's what we want to do. We are tired of doing those problems at the end of chapter 5. We want meaningful engineering education. And I told them I'm tired of grading them also, those problems, so therefore it was a win-win. And so they dragged me into creating Engineers Without Borders, and to make a long story short, 17 years later, it's pretty big, no, 15 years later, it's pretty big now with close to 17,000 members in the US and working in 43 different countries and so on. So it really exploded. So it was a good thing, there's no doubt about it. I also discovered that doing engineering in the context of the developing world was not easy, and that in fact the system that we installed broke down, a second system was installed, and a third system was installed. So lessons learned, lessons in humility, let's put it that way. For an engineer, it's always good, especially someone with a PhD. And then, so it was a life-changing experience. So really, over the past 15 years, I started that organization. Essentially, now we have an executive director and about 20 plus people on staff there working. In Denver, I don't run the organization anymore. I don't have any interest in running the organization anymore also. I mean, after a while you grow up, you know, after a while you move on, right? I mean, I'm kind of a person who likes to move on from one idea to the next. Then I started a program at the University of Colorado called Engineering for Developing Communities, which has to do still there, training engineers to work in the developing world. The idea is that while engineering is engineering, fundamentals are the same anywhere on the planet, the implementation is quite different. And so that also took off. And more recently, I helped some colleagues at Drexel University to start a program on peace engineering, engineering for peace, which I think is much needed. And our vision is big. Our vision is, can we create a peace industrial complex that is so powerful that it will make the war industrial complex obsolete? And that's, I think, to me, that's the kind of vision that really drives me today. 63, again, at that age, you know, in your 60s, at least I'm giving myself the liberty of exploring some crazy ideas, ideas that to make the world a better place. It has nothing to do with legacy, it has to do with really empowering the youth, and it's very difficult to empower the youth today with healthy and powerful solutions. There are some big issues on our planet today. Poverty is one of them. Poverty is a crime against humanity. I've mentioned that many times. And many of the criminals are not in jail, that's who are responsible for that poverty. We need to disrupt it. My job is to be a disruptor extraordinaire, based on honesty, integrity. But I want to be a disruptor. I also want to create essentially an army of disruptors who are going to disrupt in a good way the issues such as inequality, poverty, big issues that we are facing today that do not need to exist. I mean, poverty is unnecessary pain, and we can do much better than we are doing today.
I'm imagining that someone on my side of the television set here is an aspiring engineer and would want to know how engineering in the context of the developing world is different from the sort of engineering he or she must have heard most about, which is, you know, industrial engineering in say on some scale, in this country. And maybe the way to put it is, what kind of surprises did you run into as you came as a more conventionally trained engineer to work in the developing world?
That's an interesting question, how I came to change course, let's put it that way. I'm going to rephrase it that way. How did I go from, say, traditional engineering? After all, I went through the traditional process of writing papers and books. I still do that, but that's not my priority. To doing a different type of engineering, to the point even of creating a new track, if you want, of engineering. Not that I want to call it a new track, but yeah, a new area of emphasis, let's put it that way, in engineering. It really, when I went to Belize there, it really hit me. It really hit me that, can I keep on doing the same kind of engineering that I did before? And in the case of academia, publish or perishing type of mindset. Or can I do a different kind of engineering with an impact? I think an impact that improves the life of that little girl. I still remember her quite well. She was really an angel on my path, let's put it that way. At the age of 46, she really gave me kind of almost like a road sign, right? I mean, so go in this direction. I think that I had experience engineering with the top 3 inches of my head by that time. And really what that experience in Belize really made me realize that I need to bring my heart into engineering. And I know that not too many engineers will talk like that, but I do believe that, call it heart, call it love, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it compassion. So I look at it as compassion in action. Compassion in action where, it starts from here, from the heart, from this sense of belonging, this sense of being part of something bigger. You can have a spiritual dimension, a religious dimension, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to go there, but it's really a deep connection at the human level that hit me. And so the way I explain it is that I brought this deep connection into my head, and we went from the heart to the head. What I see too much in academia is, again, a bunch of people congested in here, right, the top 2 inches of the head, and they don't bring the full person into the classroom. It makes engineering look what it has always been, very sterile, very boring at times, I must say, but looks like we have done it for about 150 years or so, 200 years, and people have survived 4 years of boot camp in engineering, and well, they keep on doing that, but I don't think that's what the planet needs most right now. I think we need engineers who are much more compassionate, who use their hearts and their mind, the head essentially together, and come up with some solutions that are done right from a technical point of view, but also are the right solutions for the clients, for the environment, and also solutions that have been developed for the right reasons. So I think that there's a different mindset here. I cannot put it in writing. I sense it, I feel it, and it's not the that's being taught in most engineering schools in the country or in other countries as well. Traditional engineering has always been a left brain type of exercise, and you survive it, you do what other engineers have done in the past. I was kind of tired of that, and having it done for about 18 years or something like that, 20 years when I was 46, I just wanted to do something else, bring the whole person, bring the soul. I mean, I have different terms for that. One book that I have studied several times, that I have put aside many times, is called Engineering with Soul. How do I bring soul into engineering education, into engineering practice? And I sense it when I go to the field, which I like. It's there. It's not in the classroom, unfortunately. and I've tried to bring it into the classroom, and I already got some bad reaction actually from the students, where I was told that, yeah, it's not something we talk about in engineering, so don't bother us with cosmology or a sense of well-being, of meaning in whatever we do. We do it because we want to be engineers. And so, okay, fine. I have a hard time in bringing that aspect. But what really changed my life, I think, was a meeting with a mentor. His name is Matthew Fox, who was a Catholic priest for a while and now became Episcopalian, living in San Francisco, who wrote about 20 books. He has written 20 books. One of them in particular, which I read, really changed my life completely, was The Reinvention of Work. So how do you reinvent your work? And his entire book is about how do you bring kind of an executive summary, how do you bring soul into your work, how you bring, it's not your work, it's not your job, it's your work. What essentially gets your head on fire when you wake up in the morning? Work, not job. What's your great work? And it really hit me and said, what's my great work? It's not to write papers and books and so on. I can do that quite well. I'm more than a paper mill. I'm a human being. I interact with people. And this kind of engineering for the developing world forces you to be face-to-face with people. I cannot ignore them. I work at the village level. And that was really an eye-opening. And that, along with the trip to Belize, meeting with Matthew Fox, reading about his books, really gave me a sense of hope and a sense that there ought to be a different way to teach engineering. But I'm having a hard time. I must admit that when you're having a hard time with the students about it, my colleagues don't even ask because they think I'm nuts. Essentially, I'm kind of, being a disruptor is, nobody likes to deal with a disruptor. And the good thing I can disrupt is, the good thing is that I have promotion on tenure and I can be a disruptor. But if you're an assistant professor and you want to be a disruptor, you'll be nailed to the cross in absolutely no time whatsoever because you don't fit into the mold. So it's a long kind of answer to the question of really, what brought me to do that kind of engineering. I listened to my soul, I guess. I don't know. I've never put it that way. I just made space so I can sit down and say, well, I cannot do this kind of nonsense type of work of publishing and perishing anymore. I've got to do an alternative. I've got to do something. And that trip to Belize was, plus the combination with, plus the experience I had with Matthew Fox there, was really a life-changing experience. So for the people who watch this video, I hope you can relate to it. A message that I want to convey is that keep your eyes open, because in life you have essentially those people who show up in your life in an unexpected way and guide you. They show you a sign, and it's not a big sign, as a tweet or Facebook or something. It's a subtle sign. And that subtle sign hits you somewhere in the heart or in the head. And you can ignore it, or you can say, wow, this is the path less traveled there. Let's see what's in there for me. That takes a lot of courage. It's not easy. I can tell you that. It's not easy on you. It's not easy on your family and your friends. In fact, you may lose a bunch of friends more than you're going to gain some. People are going to think you're nuts, but I'd rather do that than to follow the path that is the most traveled path by my colleagues in engineering. I think it's, I'm glad I did it. It was not easy. It's still not easy. But hey, what else would I want to do anyway?
So you were engaged in the field off and on for 15 years? Is that roughly right?
18, yeah.
And I mean, how's that story get structured? Is it kind of problem, solution, or was there a learning curve? Does it have hills and valleys? How do you understand the curve of your learning or your experience as you went through that time?
Now, if I look in hindsight over the past, I would say 35 years or so, was there a path? Was there a structure, a linear structure? For sure, it was not linear. I mean, it was, I think that, I think things happen in life. You know, we can question whether there's some destiny or fate, or we create free will, we have free will, and so on. I don't have a clue there. There's probably a lot of questions that I can ask God when I die. In fact, I want to write a book, another book I want to write, which is more fun, is 10 questions to ask God after you die. If you had, or you can even 2 even, if you want. If you had 10 questions to ask after you die, to he or she or it or cosmic soup or whatever you want to call it, what would that be? But essentially, I don't know if there was a path, a structure. I think that, I don't know, for those of you who watch this movie, this video, you may have experienced in your life those moments where you see something and it's kind of a wow. You don't even have you cannot even put a sentence. A wow, or aha moment. Call it a aha moment. Wow, call it maybe a singular point. A place where you change course completely. I think falling in love, it's pretty much like that too. You see that person, your potential partner, and say, whoa, can you define it? No. Do you experience it? Yes. And I think that it's falling in love with an individual, falling in love with an animal, falling in love with the weather, falling in love with a tree, falling in love with your work. There's that aha moment. And I think that if we make space, and certainly have not made enough space, if you make space for those aha moments are more like a rule than an exception in life. And I think that we are blocking those aha moments with all the nonsense that we create on a daily basis. I do believe that miracles are a rule rather than an exception, and rather than the other way around. I think it's allowing the space, allowing for the aha moments. I don't even know how to describe it, to be frank with you. The wow moments to emerge. Now you have the choice either to say, no, I'm not going to follow that because I'm not ready for it. It's like someone knocks at the door and say, you want to run a marathon? Yes, I'm ready for it because I've been training it for the past 10 years. Or you say, no, I've not. You know, I'm a couch potato, I cannot run a marathon, but come back a year from now, I may be able to do it. Yeah, something like that. Does it have a structure? No. Because it's a good thing it doesn't have a structure. It has to surprise you. I think the universe surprises us all the time. And it's us who have lost the capacity. We do not remember how to be surprised. I think there's a process of undoing rather than doing, and the process of remembering that we are part of a great, essentially cosmic miracle. Again, I don't want to go into the religious aspect or the spiritual aspect, but that great mystery, in whatever form and shape you want to decide it is. But it's a reconnecting, and an aha moment gives you a time, a small amount of time to say, whoa, like whoa. You know, last time I was in Italy, and my wife and I were looking for an ATM machine, and all ATM machines before in France were broken, and we met a lady there in charge of the ATM machines, and I told her, hey, all your machines are broken, and she said, hey, you know, you don't have to speak Italian to know that that moment of hey meant a lot of things to her. Just come back. Hey. And I think it's the same, say, whoa, oh. Rediscovering that sense of awe and wonder can go a long, long way. And I think that I bumped into it many times, probably many times before my trip to Belize, I did not pay attention to it. That trip to Belize hit me with a big sledgehammer and it really changed my life.
So you mentioned this Engineers Without Borders, and then the later project, the Engineering for Peace. What's this later project about?
Well, it's essentially to realize that as engineers, we are not just providers of technical solutions, we are peacemakers. And if you look at the great accomplishments, one that crosses my mind right away is, when it was the 1970s, when the Soyuz capsule and the Apollo capsule got together, connected together. And it was Cold War on Earth, when up in space you had astronauts and cosmonauts shaking hands. Now, for that to happen, for that connection to happen, a bunch of scientists and engineers and technologists got together on both sides and worked together. Well, that Soyuz Apollo moment, call it that, whatever you want to call it, let's reproduce it. Can we create it again? Can we multiply it? Engineers have never been, associated with peace, right? And bringing people together. We have always been associated with the slide rule, that's the old version, the calculator, the nerdy type of stuff. Well, rivers do not know of borders. The air does not know of borders. Waste does not know of borders. Maybe there are quite a few, there are quite a few projects out there who are bringing people from different places together around a common issue. They could find maybe things that they may realize that they have things in common. I mean, like right now, I've been exploring, working with Palestinian engineers and Israeli engineers and Gaza engineers. Well, if you're that part of the world, you're talking about rivers go east-west, right? East-west, yeah. And what is somebody else's water becomes my waste, by the time it reaches me, or vice versa. Well, let's talk so that it's a win-win. So here's an example of, I mentioned the Soyuz Apollo example. It's a good one. I think I love it because, up in space, people were having a smile at each other. They were shaking hands. And yet, on Earth, they were pointing rockets, nuclear rockets, at each other. So it shows what's possible. And my vision, as I mentioned earlier, is that can we create a peace industrial complex that is so powerful that it will make the war industrial complex obsolete? Can we create technology that bring peace into the world where people make more money with such technologies than supporting, the making of rockets and weapons and tanks and whatever? Am I daydreaming? Hopefully not. I think that deep in us there's a sense of love and compassion and caring that essentially ties us together. Can we tap into it? Can we disrupt the business of making money by selling weapons? Can we disrupt it once and for all? I may or may not succeed. I could care less. In fact, when I mentioned that at George Washington University, that statement, can we create a peace industrial complex so powerful that we make the war industrial complex obsolete? At the end of my talk, there were a few, military contractors in the room. One guy came to me and said, look, if you keep on talking like that, you'll be assassinated, face to face. In fact, I had dinner with that person. I wanted to know how he would do it. But, yeah, okay, fine. They feel threatened, but maybe it's time to show those people who feel threatened some alternatives. They can make more money in developing technologies for peace and technology for war. I don't think that those people wake up in the morning, those military contractors, and say, hey, I'm going to harm people today. They want to make money. That's the profit, that's their, that's the sad side of capitalism, but that's the way it is. Can we give them alternatives? for now until it becomes part of their DNA and they have it under their skin that war is unnecessary. Can we do that? And again, at the age of 63, I can allow myself to not dream, but to think, is it possible in my lifetime to change that mindset once and for all? You know, it worked with Engineers Without Borders. How 10 people, when a sudden, got together and then the message spread like crazy across the entire United States and some other countries in the world and so on. How did it happen? I did not advertise or anything like that. It happened by itself. It hit a nerve in many young people today, and that was they want meaningful engineering education. And by the way, to tell you that I think we are succeeding, is that half of our members are women. In engineering, the magic number is 18 to 20%. In Engineers Without Borders, or in the Mortensen Center in Boulder, on Engineering for Developing Communities, we are close to half and half. Why? Why? Because all of a sudden we are presenting engineering from a different perspective, compassionate, caring about people, compared to a bunch of, an engineer being the nerdy type of individual who builds some new widgets, essentially, once and for all.
Mm-hmm. So what's happening to your role? I mean, when you started, you were designing a pump. And then you were helping your students to do that kind of project. Are you now moving into a spokesperson role, to a public role? Are you continuing to work as an engineer? How does it go?
Keep what's in there for me. Well, I believe in cycles of 7 years. So I'm studying a new cycle of 7 years from the age of 63 to 70. So what's in there for me in there? Well, number one, I'm putting myself in a position of service. That's number one. Whether that service can lead to more papers and publications and so on, I could care less. I'm writing another book there. That's my 5th book right now. And I'm having fun with it. I don't have a publisher yet on purpose. That way I can have fun with it. I don't have anything to prove. All I want to do is to be able to show young people, and older people as well, that there's an alternative to business as usual. That engineers are not nerds, that we can make the world a better place, that peace is important, that a peace industrial complex can replace a war industrial complex. And ultimately, I just want to be free to do it. I just want to be free to be disruptor and tell the establishment that the emperor has no claws. Now, having said that, I need to provide some alternatives. You cannot disrupt something, you cannot destroy something without providing alternatives. So what are the alternatives? I think the alternatives that I believe in, and I may change my mind over the next 7 years, is an alternative of compassion in action. It's an alternative of peace versus war. It's an alternative of empowerment. It's an alternative of bringing the whole person into engineering, not just the top 3 inches of the head. It's an alternative that is good for the planet, where people are good engineers and also better friends and husbands and parents and so on. I think that's what I'm trying to do. The same way as I have been guided, I keep my eyes open now. I've learned my lessons since about 1997, they're 20 years now. My eyes are wide open, I can tell you that, because I want to be able to identify those new messages, those aha moments, those wow moments that will guide me for the rest of my life. Whether the young people I teach recognize that, they have their own journeys. I mean, I cannot change anybody, it's mine. They have their own journey. I can just serve as a witness, as a guide. I'm not a professor, I'm a teacher. And I've been trying to teach for the past 35 years, and that's not easy. And if I succeed, I might be an educator, which is even a higher level of teaching. And that's maybe be a good goal for me over the next 5, 10, 15 years I have left, or even more. Thank you.